Thanks, Nandan, for taking time
Sure.
for the SISA Summit. So, just to get started, what do you see in terms of disruption that is happening with respect to payment space in India?
Well, I think payments in India is going through some very rapid disruption for many reasons. First is, the level of competitive intensity is going up with a large number of new banks coming. The Reserve Bank has given 21 bank licenses, including 10 payment banks. And so that's going to bring in a lot of new banks, new players, new technology, because the people coming in are from different backgrounds, telco backgrounds or startup backgrounds and so on. Mobile wallets are coming in. So I think that's one part. But the other important thing is that we think the future of payments, cashless payments, is through mobile, because we have 1 billion phones, we have 150 million or so smartphones, growing at the rate of 25 million a quarter. So we'll have 500 million smartphones soon. So the growth of smartphones is faster than the growth of, it's because when you have a card infrastructure, one is to issue the card, which they have done, debit cards. But then the acceptance infrastructure is not keeping pace with that. So I think the smartphone, especially the smartphone, will become the basis for payments. The third big thing which is happening is the whole unified payment interface, which NPCI is launching in February, and the RBI governor is launching that in April. That will basically allow any mobile to any mobile, any bank account, debit, credit, push, pull, all kinds of things. So I think all that will change payments dramatically.
So the form factors that you are looking at is mostly, something to do with the mobile, or do you see, every other form factor?
No, I think the mobile, particularly the smartphone, and it could be an Android phone, or iOS phone, or a Windows phone. But you'll have, because people will have an app on the phone or some kind of a piece of executable code, which allows you to do payments through the NPCI switch.
Any different trends that you see in India compared to what what kind of innovations are happening across?
Yeah, I think the big thing in India is that our payment platforms are going to be open. The reason for that is NPCI is a not-for-profit Section 25 company, which is owned by all the banks. So it's a cooperative structure. So they are building open standards by consulting all the stakeholders. So I think the fact is that UPI is based on a very successful product they have called IMPS, Immediate Payment System, which has already got 30% of the remittance market. But IMPS has been very successful as a credit product when you want to send money to somebody's account. What IMPS really didn't do that much on the debit side. But as you go towards merchant payments and even P2P, debit to your account and credit to somebody else's account, that kind of model is very important. So I think that's one part, that you have an open standard for interoperability among payments. The second is authentication is going to be based on open standards. I mean, you're going to have two-factor authentication, where one factor is the phone. So instead of the card in your possession, the phone is in your possession, and the phone will be linked to the mobile number will be linked to the ID of the person and all that through HOTP and other protocols. And then the second factor will be a PIN, which again will be standardized across all the banks. So that means that, let's say I have a bank account in bank A, and I have a mobile app from bank A, but I want to debit my bank account in bank B. The bank A app can take my PIN, send it to bank B, and bank B does the authentication. So this is, you can think of this as distributed authentication, where the app which does receives the authentication credentials is not where the authentication is done. So this means that you will have to standardize on MPIN. So I think the standardization across the industry in India is unique. And of course, the third factor is Aadhaar, which gives you a biometric authentication.
On the acquiring side, how do you see that happening? And you said the push and the pull.
Yeah, so I think the acquiring side will also be a phone. So the acquiring merchant will have an app on his phone, and when you ring up some kind of buy something, or whether it's an online transaction or a proximity transaction, the merchant's phone will send a pull request to the consumer's phone. Let's say the bill is 800 rupees. He will send a request for 800 rupees to the consumer's phone, and the consumer then enters his credentials. Now, In the case of when it's an MPIN, he just enters the MPIN number. Now, and the phone is one factor, the MPIN becomes the second factor. Phone is what you have and MPIN is what you know. The important thing is the credentials are entered on the consumer's phone. Unlike in the card world, where I go and swipe my card on the merchant's device, here it's more secure because all credentials are entered on my own device. So I never enter the credentials on my merchant's device. So I put my credentials on my own phone, and that authorizes the debit to my bank account and credit to the merchant's account.
And specifically from, you see all these mobile wallets, cropping up. So the interoperability of mobile wallets, do you see things happening in that?
No, I think mobile wallets have been very successful, and I think RBI's strategy of calibrated innovation, allowing new players in wallets, has been very successful in introducing people to the concept of online payments and payments from wallets, the convenience of wallets. Essentially, it's like a single factor authentication on wallets. And that has seen the growth of companies like Paytm with 100 million wallets, MobiKwik, which has 20, 30 million wallets, and many other wallet players. But wallets are very good for, you credit money into a wallet from your bank account, and then you use it in all these merchant payments, right? But you can't have interoperability among wallets and so on. So I think increasingly with the UPI coming, and many of the wallet companies becoming payment banks, then they'll plug into that interoperability. So interoperability, I don't think will come so much from wallets becoming interoperable, as over time all of them coming on to the UPI platform. And that interoperability is very important, especially for P2P, because P2P requires me to say, I have some account, you have some account. I don't want to know where your account is, I just want to send you money. So that only happens when you have interoperability across service providers.
Do you see mobile wallets turning out to be micropayments, specific for micropayments and for different segments being created?
Oh, absolutely, because I think they're good for small value payments. They are lightweight. So the transaction costs are low. They are convenient because you can do with single click and so on. So I think mobile wallets will have a role. I mean, today when you use a taxi service, you always use a mobile wallet because you can just walk out of the taxi and your account gets debited, right?
Where do you see the trends of mobile point-of-sale terminals on the acquiring side going? I mean, do you see that being, on the acceptance side, playing a larger role going forward?
No, I think in the card world, you had specific devices which are POS devices, which had to be certified, and they had the PED and all that security stuff. But increasingly, the phone will be the device. So I think it'll be much easier for a merchant to put in. When you think about it, earlier we had specific devices. Then after people like Square and EasyTap came, you took a phone and you put in the card reader into the audio jack. The next step is you don't need that. The phone itself becomes the thing, because if the phone is making a debit request to a consumer's phone, then you don't need any special hardware, because you're not reading the credentials on the merchant's device. You're entering the credentials on the consumer's device. So any phone can become a merchant acquiring device.
How do you see security, playing a role in the entire payment?
No, security is extremely important, because we want to combine convenience with security. Now, one aspect is credentials and authentication. And I think two-factor authentication is very important. But at the same time, you want to make two-factor authentication very simple. So the phone is one-factor authentication, okay? And the phone is registered with the bank, the phone and the ID is connected and so on. So phone becomes one factor, and that's very easy, because in the card world, I have to send a card to the consumer. I have to send him by speed post or PIN by another, expensive. Whereas now it's all software. So phone becomes one factor. Now when you're using the MPIN becomes the second factor. So the MPIN is entered on my own phone, and that becomes the second factor. But once you have Aadhaar biometric authentication, for example, if you look at your Apple iPhone, that Touch ID, which Apple Pay uses, is a biometric authentication of your fingerprint. And now Google also supporting biometric fingerprint, and Microsoft, the new Lumia, has an iris scanner and so on. And then there are people coming out with software biometric scanners, so you don't even need a piece of hardware. So, and the Aadhaar system has about 950 million people on it with Aadhaar, the fingerprints and the iris, and I can do an online authentication. So, on the phone, I will just read my fingerprint or read my iris and check with Aadhaar, and that becomes second factor. So, the two-factor authentication will either be mobile phone plus PIN or mobile phone plus Aadhaar biometric. So, that's very secure because you have two factors, but both of them are public. They're not from the provider, but it's like a public utility that we have. And then there's the whole issue of how do we encrypt on the phone, how do you make sure there's no man-in-the-middle attacks, how do you make it secure in when the packet is going across the internet. So there's a lot of other issues. How do you make sure that you don't have, it's not embedded code, but maybe some kind of a utility to which you make calls. There are a lot of issues on smartphone app design for security purposes.
So what standards, do you see India needing to develop, or is there first of all a requirement for that, and if there is, where do you see that?
No, I think one standard will be the Unified Payment Interface Standard, sure, which is a public standard. It's something which has been put out for discussion. It's on the website. People are given their comments. So that's a public interface API for payments from mobile to mobile, push, pull, and so on and so forth. And that also includes the idea of virtual payment addresses, which is another part of security. Because what happened in the card world was that when you gave your card to a merchant, the merchant actually stores the card number. And a lot of the breaches in the US have been because card numbers have been stolen from, say, retailers. There are many incidents. In the UPI world, you can have a virtual payment address. So it's not the real account number, it's a virtual address. And I can pay or collect from a virtual address. So the merchant only sees the virtual address. So the merchant doesn't see any underlying account number. So all these layering allows you to reduce the risk, because even if the merchant's list of virtual payment addresses is revealed, I can always, it's a revocable address, so I can just change the address. So there are many things happening, in this new world. I think the fact that you use asymmetric, encryption, digitally signed data, all these things. So the way you think about security in an open internet world is different from where in the card world you had a secure network, you had ISO 8583 protocols, you had those PET devices which you had. So I think this is a different way of thinking about security.
So where do you see NFC and security? I mean, when you say NFC, the traditional thought process is it's not secure, because it's proximity based.
Sure. No, I think NFC is one more tool of proximity. It's a transport layer, right? So when I'm sort of matching my phone to the merchant's phone, how do I communicate? I can communicate over the telephone system, or I can do a local proximity connection through NFC, Wi-Fi direct, Bluetooth. There are many ways. So to me, they're all transport layers, and you can have security on top of that. So the way if you send the packets encrypted over the NFC, then you can make it secure.
On the assurance part, I mean, where do you see companies like SISA, playing a role in the, what is that you would look forward for companies like SISA who are in the payment?
No, I think SISA and companies like yours have to start gearing up for this new world. I think as I said, the way you think of security in the internet world is different from the card world. For many reasons I explained to you, different than cards and phones and so on. So I think you need to start thinking about that. Also, I think the industry should engage with the standard developers. Because I don't know whether, for example, you guys have looked at the UPI standards and given your comments from a security perspective. So I think engaging, because right now these standards are getting developed. So engaging with the standard development in the development phase and bringing your security concerns right now to the table will ensure that once these systems are rolled out, they'll meet your assurance standards. Because once they roll out, they'll roll out very quickly, and there'll be 100 million people using these payment systems. And then you try to go and tweak something, it'll become difficult. So it's better to engage right now in the process.
And what message would you send out there? About 100 security professionals, payment security professionals across the globe who will be attending the summit.
Well, yeah, sure. I think the message is start gearing up for this disruption. Fundamentally, we are moving from a card world with ISO 8583 kind of protocols, PET devices, scanning, the whole world to the online world, where it's on mobile phone, it's using PKI, digital signatures, encryption, authentication using biometrics. So it's all new kinds of ideas are there. So I think they have to start seeing this world as a very different world from the previous world. In some cases, it's more worrisome because it's on the public network. But in other cases, because if it's well designed for security, it can be more secure than the earlier approach. So I think gearing up for this transition is very important for security professionals.
Thanks, Nandan, for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate. Thanks for being with us.
Sure, thank you.